This is the Horse-Human Connection, a captivating podcast where we extend into the world of equine-assisted learning, horse training, and gentleness in working with these magnificent creatures. Captivating stories from the leading professionals and ordinary people alike unravel novel ideas in being with horses. The Horse-Human Connection is an idea, a place, and a voice. The idea is to support the quiet revolution and recognize the intelligence and true nature of the horse. The place is a destination farm near the Umpqua Forest and River that slows down visitors and patrons enough to experience the shift. The voice is this podcast. Welcome to today's episode.
There we go.
Hi, welcome to the Horse-Human Connection Matrix podcast. With me today is Jini Patel from Listen to Your Horse, and I'm so excited to have you here and get to talk with you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Looks like we're going to cover a nice variety of topics.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with horses?
Well, I started riding horses at age 2 in Nairobi in Kenya, which consisted of me sitting on a pony and being led around an arena. And then we emigrated and wound up in Alberta, Canada by the time I was 7. And so when I was 8, I got my first horse by myself, and my parents knew nothing about horses. I didn't know anybody who knew anything about horses. So I had one book called Your First Horse. That was my guide. But I got a pregnant mare. So I was just boom, thrown into it. So no one knew what to do. I'm 8 years old. So my horse, who, of course, she's not just a horse, she was a guide for me. She taught me everything that I needed to know and schooled me quite differently from how I would be taught by a human. And our relationship with riding was a huge part of our relationship. And then that grew, and eventually I had at one point 4 horses, and people would give me their, horses that were going to be slaughtered because nobody could do anything with them and they were dangerous. And I would work with them and, sell them to a 2-year-old after they were gentled and their trauma was gone. And so that was my childhood up until university. And then after university, I started traveling to Asia and Europe. And so I was on the go. And then having already had horses, I knew how much work was involved. So then when my children were young and I was finally in one location, I didn't want to get horses because I knew with young children plus a business, I did not have time for horses. So I waited till my children were a certain age, and then the horses came back into my life. And in a very different iteration this time around as well, which I had no idea about. I got a horse and I was thinking I'll have 2 and my daughter can have 1. And so they'll have company because you never want to have a horse by itself. It's a herd animal. And we can go riding together and then the horses in the universe had a completely different idea for me. So yeah.
That's what you get for having an agenda, right?
I'm just gonna have a horse to go for nice rides, and we had a 300-acre park nearby, and that was my idea, and I thought that would be awesome, but no.
So what happened instead?
Well, what happened instead is that first horse. Now, at that point, I already had enough awareness that I said to her, so she was an Andalusian. Mm-hmm. And she'd come to me all the way from New York. Again, that's a separate story of how that happened. But I had actually painted her 5 years before down to the markings on her face. But she had only been ridden for 3.
When you say you painted her, it's not that you were hired to do a portrait, but that she came to you and you painted her having never met her.
I was doing a painting from a horse in a book. Mm-hmm. And then I dropped into the space where time and space disappeared. Mm-hmm. And this painting just emerged. So it was loosely based on the horse on the book, but it ended up being an exact portrait of her.
Goosebumps, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I had enough awareness at that point to say to her, I'm not going to ride you until you invite me onto your back. But I still had a very clear agenda and intention that this was going to be a riding relationship, because that was the thing that I enjoyed the most about horses. Like just that whole, I mean, anyone who's ridden a horse that they've had a unity with understands what I'm talking about. Not trail riding or lesson riding. I mean, that for me is almost unpleasant, but a horse that you're in actual communion and unity with, I mean, there's few things that are more amazing. So that was my agenda. And so I had her for 6 months, and I would just hand walk her. And most of the time I would just take the lead rope and loop it over her back, and we would just walk, and we would head into this 300-acre park. And then one day we'd done the whole loop, which was 2 hours. And she's like, let's go again. And I'm like, no way. Like, I'm so tired, because at a certain point she wanted to run. And I'm like, I'm running at my maximum speed. And she's like, let's go faster. I'm like, I can't go any faster. So I'd already had quite the workout, and she wants to go again. And I was like, no, I got to go home. I just have enough energy to make the 20-minute walk back home. And so she's like, fine, then get on my back. And I was like, I thought you'd never ask. So I get on her back. So she's 9 years old. She's been ridden 3 months in her entire life. I get on her back for the first time on a paved public road. She's wearing a halter with a lead rope, but she said, get on my back. So I did. And I just led her over to a fence and climbed on, and we went for another round through the park. And it was incredible, and it was amazing. And the other riders in the park were completely freaked out. But it was cool too, because when I would ride her in the park, like, she's an Andalusian, purebred Andalusian. Now, all the things that they try to get Andalusians to do in dressage, like the gathering and the prancing and the arched neck, when you have a horse that's doing what they want, and they're fully empowered and they're fully embodied, an Andalusian's body moves like that naturally. But it is natural, and it's fluid, and it's fully enlivened and gathered up. And that was her and me in the park. And people would be like, and then they would be like frightened, because they would see that I just had a lead rope that I wasn't really even holding. And how would I control my horse when they got near me? And so it just, right from the beginning, we were kind of like blowing people's minds a little bit.
And how long ago was that?
So that would have been 8 years ago.
So I think a lot has changed in the last 8 years.
Yes.
I don't think people would be nearly as surprised.
That was the beginning. So yeah, today, exactly. A lot more awareness. So then I rode her in the park, and we had a wonderful riding relationship for about 6 months. And then she became lame for no apparent reason. And when I clued into her, I was like, what's going on here? Like, why would you be lame? And she would just like not really answer me. And so one day my daughter was out, and I said, can you talk to Zora and find out what she's doing with this lame thing? And so my daughter comes back, and she says she doesn't want to be, she said she wants to be part of a team. She said, it's like all the pressure is on her for the relationship with you, and she doesn't want it all on her. She wants to be part of a team. And I was like, okay. And I had another pony in with her, my daughter's pony. But this was about me and having all my riding, this is my interpretation at the time, all my riding expectations and relationship expectations were on one horse. And she's like, that's too much pressure. I don't want that. I want to be part of a team, so I'm not the only one. And I was like, fair enough. So I thought, okay, go ahead.
So, if I could interrupt and interject for just a minute. I'm listening to you, and I have experiences like this, so it doesn't sound unusual to me. But I think a lot of people may have questions about, well, what is that like when the horse is actually telling you, get on my back? Like, how does that come? Is it a thought form? Is it a picture? Is it really strong? When it first happened, was there any doubt? Like, can you talk a little bit, like fill in a little bit about that?
Sure. So for me, and I categorize all those as telepathic communication. I figure that's the easiest term that most people have an understanding of. For me, that takes the form of pictures, thought, with something I call a thought package. So it would be like if you and I would have a 10-minute conversation and I could just transmit that to you. It's like all packaged together, but it's about one topic. and sometimes actual physical words like a sentence. So it comes to me in any variety of ways. And for me, the communication is the same with a horse, with a tree, with the land. There's no difference. It's the same process and method of communication. And or with the divine, my communications with the divine. So it's all of it is this telepathic communication. And for me, I developed that as a child. And I believe that as children, especially the younger children, like I think around 2 is when children start getting the message from the surroundings that no, that's not real. But I think until age 2, most children are probably fully telepathic. I mean, I certainly communicated that way with my babies before they were verbal, and they would communicate very clearly with me. Like one time my son, he was like, change my diaper. I was like, I just changed your diaper. There's no way you've peed in the last 5 minutes. And he's like, change my diaper. So I go, okay. So I open him up. Well, somehow a penny had fallen. He must have picked it up and dropped. I have no idea where this thing came from, but it was in the front of his diaper and it was annoying him. So his way of communicating that to me was to tell me change my diaper, because he knew then I'd see it and remove the object. So that's the same method that I use, and what I tell, and I have a whole healing business where I teach people how to heal their digestive diseases, and that's called Listen to Your Gut. And the premise behind Listen to Your Gut is your body knows everything that it needs to heal itself. You just have to get in communication. And again, it's that same kind of communication. Your gut guidance, your gut intuition, it's all the same type of communication. And once you enter that space, or you give permission for that to start happening, the communication for everything just opens right up.
That makes sense. Yeah. I know a lot of people that have similar experiences, and sometimes it's a little different for different people. So I was curious about yours. And I think listeners who don't have or haven't had yet, or are not aware of those experiences, are curious.
And when a lot of times people will say, well, I can't do that. So how do I do that? And my answer is, okay, first of all, you can always take a workshop on intuition development. There's a ton of them. You can take a workshop on animal communication, because that's the same thing. You can also, I was listening to a podcast with regenerative agriculture, and there's this woman, and she's like, everybody can talk to the earth and the plants. This is not even a skill that needs to be developed. And what she would have people do is go and walk out in the field. So of course, when you're walking in nature and you're in more of a contemplative listening space, your breathing is relaxed, your body is grounded and sunk into the earth. And from that space, you walk through the garden, and she would say to them, just be open to whatever comes. And every single person would get some kind of information. They would say, I just had this picture of blah, blah, blah. Or I heard a voice saying, or I heard like this thing of, and every single person received a valid communication from the plants in that go, which she knew very well. So she could confirm, and she could say, yes, because of this. So it can even be that simple, like just get your breathing just relaxed and centered and opened. Picture yourself grounding into the earth, and just either sit or walk, calmly, and listen to the birds singing, and just allow your nervous system to drop. And then very, very key is you have to trust the little tiny whispers, nudges, ideas, something that floats into your, because in the beginning, it's going to be really tiny. It's going to be really soft and really quiet. It's like an exercise that you haven't used. That muscle is, or a muscle that you haven't used, that muscle is really weak. And it's only as you listen and trust and act that strengthens the muscle, that strengthens the intuition. And then the voice gets louder, the pictures get clearer, and it develops on like that. So in the beginning, to just do it as an experiment, like just trust those tiny little things and act on them. Take action, very important. You can't just have it be a mental exercise and go, okay, well, I heard that and I'm going to wait and see what happens. No, you have to take action to whatever was connected with that and then see how it evolves and proceeds.
So participating.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've had the experience sometimes of feeling like there's a stronger connection when there's someone else who's developed some of that ability, some of their intuition, and we're both there with the horses meditating and coming into more of a heart space, or possibly altering our brain waves into a place where I think the reception is better. And it seems like it's more clear when I'm there with another person often than when I'm by myself. Do you have any experience with that, or have you heard of other people speak to that? I call it triangulation, but I don't know. That's not like a proper dictionary term for it.
I know people that work that way because they call it holding space for the connection.
Okay.
So if you have someone else's energy that's kind of holding space or anchoring, it seems to potentize, or there's a synergy that can be involved, that all of a sudden, you may be able to access things you couldn't access on your own. Or like you said, it becomes more clear and more. For me, with animals, it doesn't work like that. And again, like, we have to be really honest and authentic about these things. So I've had experiences with professional animal communicators where we have asked the same question. I said, let's ask the same question, see what we get. And we get different answers. And so then it's like, okay, well, let's ask the horses for clarification in the physical realm. And I think this is a really important thing because, for all of us, any communication that we receive, whether it's even verbal, goes through our filters.
Lens. Right, through our lens. Yeah.
So it's like, well, how clear of distortion am I? If I'm running trauma, if I'm running woundings, if I'm running suppositions or assumptions, or all of it's going to come through those lenses to me, which is why even with verbal communication, misunderstandings are rife, and people have a lot of, even verbally, physically communicating, it's really hard sometimes to work something out because everything is coming through the two people's filters and distortions. So we have to understand that that applies in the telepathic realm as well. And so the way to help guard against that is, for me, I ask the horses for physical confirmation of what I just received telepathically. Show me physically through an action. So let's take something really basic. Let's say you and I are there with a horse and we're asking, do you want us to open this gate? And we both get an answer. And let's say you get the answer, yes, open the gate, and I get the answer, no. Okay, or no, or not now. So then we turn to the horse and we say, can you give us physical confirmation? Like, what did you actually say? And the horse lifts its hoof and bangs on the gate. Okay, your interpretation, what you heard was correct. Mine was muddled. Mine was coming through some kind of distortion, or maybe my energy field is disturbed today. Maybe I'm not grounded enough. I'm not clear enough, so I can't hear clearly. And so these things I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is an extremely important thing, because if people believe they're communicating with their animals and then they take, let's say, physical health action, that could be disastrous for the animal if they've heard wrong, if they've got the wrong information. So it's especially for anything where it's going to directly physically affect your animal, for sure you want to ask for clarification.
Yeah. And that makes sense. My horses will often act things out for me. Like one of my horses recently came out of a 6-year retirement to give a lesson to a little girl that she really liked, because the other horse was very confused. She banged on the gate with her hoof. I took her out in the round pen, said, "Are you sure?" And the saddle was hanging over the side of the round pen. She walked over and stuck her nose on the saddle and looked at me. I'm like, okay, you're sure? We'll do it.
That crystal clear communication right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even for something like haltering, I'm like, when I would ask the horses, because, they say, well, don't use rope halters because of the knots on the pressure points, right? But the thing is, if you're someone who doesn't ever pull on the halter, then the difference in weight between a rope halter and a regular nylon or leather halter is huge. So I would hold up both halters and I'd be like, say before we went out for a hike, which one do you want? Every single horse always walked over and put their nose on the rope halter.
That's interesting. I'm going to bring that back because I've given up on rope halters, but I didn't actually give the choice in that way. I've done that before with other equipment, but thank you for that. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the animal communication and the lenses that can come through. Oh, I had a question about, I'm blanking on it now.
Well, the last thing we were talking about was having someone else there, and you found that strengthened your ability to hear. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the herd. When I first found your website and started watching some of the videos and reading a lot of the articles, which I really enjoyed, one sticks in my head about a horse named Jax. And a particular moment that something happened, it's been about 3 or 4 years, so I don't remember exactly. And then I went back and recently looked again at some of your YouTube videos, and your herd has grown. And I watched one of the integration ones. And so I'm curious about your decision to expand the herd, and do you ever miss it being smaller, and how has it changed your interactions with them?
Well, this is an awesome question because this has been just a journey and a half. And, to go from my idea of having one horse and a horse for my daughter to then Zora saying, I want to be part of a team. I don't want to be a single horse. So I said, okay, I'll go get another horse. And that's when I thought, well, for me, for riding and I wanted something with a draft. I may only weigh 120 pounds, but I've researched the anatomy of the horses and I understand what it's doing to their spine, asking them to carry us. So I'm like, well, I want the horse who's going to be burdened by me the least. So I wanted a draft or a draft cross or something like that, which led me to Odalina. And then when I went to see Odalina, she was a slaughter rescue, severely malnourished, like her bones were just sticking out everywhere. She was like a head on a stick, like just really badly managed horses. So they had an owner, but the owner had never touched them or done anything. So they're called semi-feral because they're effectively wild horses, but they just technically have an owner. And of course, because they were kept in a big ranch, but for the number of horses who'd just been multiplying like rabbits, there wasn't enough food. So anyway, I go to see her, and then another horse that's been rescued in the same batch was Montaro. And I felt instantly drawn to him. I saw his picture on the same Facebook page. So I thought, I want to go and meet this horse too, just to see, because wow, he's amazing. So I had actually gone to see Montaro first because he was closer to, the house. And I walked up to Montaro and he came straight up to me and we did that tantric breathing where you exchange in breath, out breath for 2 minutes.
Wow.
Solid. And I was like, I am now a part of you and you are a part of me. This is the horse that I have to take. And he was a stallion, which I'd never had a stallion before. And I had no idea, but I was like, okay, this is the horse that I have to take for sure. And then because I had originally felt a real pull to Odalina, I went to see her next. Well, she, again, due to the first time they were handled was when they were rounded up into the trailer to go to slaughter. So she was absolutely terrified of humans and ropes. And if she would see you, she would just bolt to the far end of the pasture. So she was in, I think, a 2 or 3 acre field. And I walked in and she walked right up to me. And the woman was like, wow. And right away, instant connection with her. So I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? I have to do both. Like I went there to get one more horse. I can't leave either of them. Very strong connection, very strong sense of purpose and destiny. And this is meant to be. So I arranged for both of them. And this was a 6-hour drive away from my place. And like I said, I have kids. I actually have 2 businesses and blah, so I'm super busy. So I had arranged for a really experienced hauler to go up there and pick them up. And a friend of mine who is psychics had said to me, I just keep getting the same message that you really need to be there. And I said, I can't, I have no time. It's a 6-hour drive there, 6 hours back. There's just no way, blah, blah, blah. She goes, okay, but I keep getting the same message. You really need to be there, or I don't know what's going to happen. I said, it'll be fine. Super experienced haulers. The rescue woman who's been working with them is there. It'll be fine. So I send a trailer. Montaro gets on, no problem. Odalina will not get on the trailer. They drug her to the point where she is almost falling over, and they cannot get her to put one foot on the ramp.
Wow.
So they give up and they come down, and I end up having to pay for both horses, but all I get delivered is Montaro. I was like, ah! So I go up, I think it took me a week or two to be able to go up, because I'm now handling Montaro, who's there as a stallion at a boarding facility that is not set up for stallions. So it's starting to get hairy already, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I drive up Ciodolina and I go, and meanwhile, the woman at the rescue had already said to me, she says, I never say this to people. I've never done this before, but I keep feeling like that Jax, who is Montaro's brother, was in the pen with him. I keep feeling that Jax is meant to be with you. And I was like, there's no way. I can't go from 1 horse to 4. Like, that's insane. And 2 of them are stallions. And my husband will like lose his mind. Like, there's just no way. So I was like, hard no, absolute no. Like, 2 for me is really pushing my envelope. And I was only on 5 acres that I was self-boarding at someone else's property. So anyway, I get up there and Odie says to me, I'm not getting on the trailer without Jax. I was like, so she basically held my hand to the fire. So I either cut my connection with her and walked away, or I take Jax. So at that point, I was like, I'll take Jax. So we load Jax, and then Odie gets on the trailer.
Right away.
And we're headed, took her 20 minutes. No big deal.
Yeah.
We're headed back down because she was like, I'm not leaving him. He has to come. So that's how I wound up with the first 4. Then, in between the time I can get them castrated, because Jax wasn't sexually active yet, but Montaro had already bred females. In between the time I can get him in for the surgery, Montaro goes through a solid wood fence and breeds Odalina. So once, he went through once. So I didn't know she was pregnant, but I found out later. In fact, she hid the pregnancy from me. But anyway, long story short, we end up with Juno. So now I have 5 horses, which is a lot. I'm in one of the most expensive cities in the world on rented land. It's so precarious. It is so stressful. But I really understand that something bigger than just me is happening here. And so that's the point at which the horses had said to me, turn on the camera. I was like, and start videoing me. And I was like, and they were like, we have messages we want to share. We just need you to turn on the camera. So I was like, okay. So it was the whole YouTube channel, everything was their idea, not mine. So I just started videoing them. And then the feedback from people was just incredible. And they were receiving so much help and enlightenment. They were crying as they watched the videos, like things were just happening in a really meaningful way. And so I think I had the 5 of them for, 2 years. I would have to go look at the dates. It's all a blur. And then, yes, it had been about 2 or 3 years. And for the last 2 years, I've now moved them to a bigger property. Every single time I arrived and I came to the property and I walked into either the paddock or the barn, I would hear, there's a black horse missing. There's a black horse, like every freaking day. And I would say to them, when we have our own land, we can allow the black horse can come, but this is absolute insanity. The place I'm at now is already insane. My expenses are off the charts, and my stress levels and I, because whenever you're self-boarding on someone else's land, there's always a lot of logistics and all the energies of those people to deal with. And it was already quite stressful. And so for 2 years, I heard there's a black horse missing. And for 2 years, I said, get us land first. We need to have land. But I'm in the most expensive place in the world to have horses. It's more expensive than, the areas surrounding New York or anywhere else that you would think would be the most expensive place in the world.
And you're in Canada.
I'm in Vancouver. I'm in the lower mainland of Vancouver. Yeah. Okay. So land is a minimum of $1 million an acre.
Oh my word.
Yeah. Because Canada is one of the few places that the Chinese government would allow people to buy. Taiwan and Hong Kong, all of those investors came in, bought up properties, including land properties, and just pushed the prices through the roof. And the Canadian government had no controls on that. So that's where I live. And my husband was unwilling to move anywhere else in Canada. And my kids were all in high-level competitive sports at each of their schools, or my daughter was in competitive gymnastics with a certain gym. So nobody was willing to move or relocate. Wow. So I'm now stuck in an insanely expensive environment. This is my response is, when we have our own land. Then I'm on Facebook and I see this blurry picture taken at dusk. I can't even make out the head hardly of a black horse. And I know that's the black horse. That's the black horse. So that black horse was Kalia. So at that point, again, I'm faced with a decision, right? This is just a blurry picture on Facebook. Again, a wild horse that has been rescued from slaughter. They were basically culled off of a mixture of what we call in Canada crown land, so public land. A mixture of public land and Indian reservation where these horses had just been running wild. And somebody had decided there were too many of them, rounded them up, drove them into trailers. They were on their way to the slaughterhouse because nobody wants completely wild, untouched, unhandled horses. They are hugely intimidated by that. So the woman who I had gotten Montaro and Jackson Odie from, one of those women was running a bigger rescue now. She had an arrangement with the slaughter trailer guys that when they had a load heading to slaughter, she would not ask any questions. They would just phone her up and they'd say, we're on our way to the slaughterhouse. Do you want them? And she would say yes or no. And if she said yes, they would reroute to her rescue. She would pay the same price as the slaughterhouse and they would give the horses to her. So this is Kalia, the black horse. And so I'm faced with, again, another decision of, are you going to stick to what you said? And the thing is, yes.
That's so hard with the horses. They don't understand it the way we do. Like, it's really difficult to change your mind with horses, right?
Yeah. And also for me, I feel it's beyond the horses. It's more a part of just the divine guidance that I have always listened to since I was 7 years old. 7 years old is when I came into a personal telepathic relationship with God, creator, source. And I have always followed my guidance. I married my husband. We got engaged 3 days after we met because God told me this is the one. And I was like, okay, I trust. I didn't even know him. When we got married, we had spent 30 physical days together. And that was 29 years ago and 3 children later. So my guidance has been through some very tough tests. And of course, then again, just like with the horse with the animal communication, I put him through some physical real world tests, which he passed. So I was like, okay, this is legit. This is absolutely rock solid communication. So this is my pattern as a human in this lifetime, is that I receive what for many people, including myself, would be very difficult guidance. And I always trust it and I always act, and it's always for my highest good. I have a history of that built up. So now I'm like, this is the black horse. And I know if I go and see her, we're done. We're on that pathway. The minute I see her, we're in. So then, shades of Odie and Jax here. I go to see her, but she's with 2 other herd mates that she kept together through the cull and a transfer to the first rescue and a transfer to the second rescue. So this is her herd and she will not be separated from them. But I just want it because she's pregnant, of course. She's a wild horse, so she's pregnant. One of the other horses she's with in her herd is pregnant. And the other one is another stallion. It's like, I've already done this. I know how batshit crazy this is going to be. But this is what the universe is asking me to do. And do I trust or do I not? So that's, again, there's a whole series on the blog about, it's called the Empowered Mustang series. And there's a whole series of blog posts and videos that track that process. But the bottom line is, at great personal cost, I took all 3, which of course turned into 5 because the 2 were pregnant. And then at the same time, there was another horse from that exact same herd who came, and I knew he was meant to be with them. That's Cobra. And Cobra is like a video reader favorite. Like, he was obviously meant to. So now I'm looking at 6. I'm going from 5 to 11 horses in one fell swoop.
Gosh. Okay. This is a great story. And I'm glad that that is videoed on your blog where people can learn a little bit more about it. Let's take a break and come back on the second video. Thank you so much. This is great.
Sounds good.